New merch just dropped. It's limited edition, only available for 1 week. Go to corridordigital.store to get yours. Available in both t-shirt and hoodie.
Yo, what up, everyone? We are back.
Hi, what's up, everybody?
The Corridor Cast.
It's me and Wren today.
There's a nice blank spot here on the video feed next to me. And, oh, you centered us. Now there's a blank spot here and a blank spot way over there.
Sam's cranking on his Pokeball video, and is that coming out this weekend?
I believe so.
Wow.
On
Okay.
Sunday.
Yeah. So, wait. When does this podcast go live on YouTube?
Friday.
Friday. Okay. So then this weekend is applicable to both.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. We're
Okay.
filming this Wednesday afternoon for those of you curious.
Yeah. That's cool. What's up, everybody in the chat? How's it going? Good to see ya.
Niko, you were just preparing a bunch of interesting visual effects shots.
I
for
was.
me.
Let's see
Not
if this...
using traditional visual effects tools.
Let's see how this turned out. But you don't get to see it yet. I'm going to show you at the same time we show the chat.
How's that gonna work? The camera's over there. I'm over here.
All right. Man. Trying to manage files on an iPad is a little bit crazy.
And it's one of the main reasons why I moved to a MacBook rather than an iPad.
But I do know how to do it. Can I send this directly to Christian through Discord?
Riveting stuff for the podcast.
From my
everyone.
files. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay, so let me talk about what I'm doing here real quick. There's a whole bunch of crazy new visual effects tools that have been coming out, and I thought it'd be worth talking about some of that on
just
the podcast.
over the last week.
Yeah, it's
last
crazy.
Few days.
Crazy, and really cool things too.
We talked a couple weeks about the Pika Editions stuff, being able to just add full CG creatures or things of that nature into a shot.
Yeah, so they came out
stuff with that.
They came out with a new thing called Pika Swaps, which is also super brand new. And with that, you can basically highlight something in your image and swap that thing in your image. So you're basically going to do a video to video conversion from a real life video to a diffusion and temporally aware generated video.
Okay.
But it's gonna be informed by your real life video. But they let you isolate areas of it. So Christian, I sent you a little video clip here.
Is this similar to that thing I've been seeing on Instagram of people microwaving their pets?
No. So there's
okay. Let me rephrase. Okay, not actually. It's like the microwave filter, and basically they take a picture of their pets or someone, and it just solos them out of the shot, and they rotate around in a turntable.
Oh, there's that too.
And if there's a dog facing away from camera, it'll rotate them around, and then they'll have this really creepy human face. It is hilarious.
So you can train in motions, and you can train in subjects and things like that. So Pika has this clay squish or the balloon inflator.
Yes.
You can blow something up. So those are trained in motions. They trained on. It's an open VFX database of videos that have those effects in them, and they've trained on that database, and they've since come out with things like Pika Editions where you can add something to your scene from a picture, and then there's Pika Swaps. So there's all these and these are all based on actual research projects around diffusion video and whatnot. But I did a little experiment here where I recorded you, Wren, sitting on the couch right before we started this podcast, and I wanted to try replacing your head with the head of a dog.
What the heck? What the heck?
And these are experiments in character replacement, and imagine if you want to make Smeagol 5 years from now for let's say Lord of the Rings hadn't been made yet, and they're okay, well we're gonna need a Smeagol in our shot, and we're still gonna film like a dude, and we're gonna replace him.
Wait,
but
no,
instead
bring
of
that
using
back. Bring that back.
I just can't get it on stream.
Oh, Christian's trying to figure out how to get on stream. He can't figure out how to get on stream.
So, I thought people were watching that on the stream there.
No, we can see it.
Oh.
How do we?
Because it just goes black screen on VLC.
Oh, dang.
Oh, weird. Black screen on VLC, huh?
Let me screen cap on the VLC.
You know what you could probably do is you could probably
I'm trying to
open.
put it in the browser. I think all the other ones will work.
Okay.
This specific file for some reason. Oh wow.
Change the. It's
HEVC, man, guys,
It's a
computers. You
.mov.
think computers would be better than they are? But man, Windows is a mess. How is it still a mess? How is it that I can still hit the Windows button and start typing something like Paint, and it gives me the wrong results first that
Can
don't
you
have those
export-
words in it?
Here, screen cap this on your.
Before I can definitely.
All right, I'll do an MP4.
So okay,
by
let's
screen capping
describe
it on my
what
phone.
we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Essentially, you added this yellow lab golden retriever head to my body, but it's got this kind of weird white outline around it. It's not like a photoreal thing, but it's more on the photo side than cartoon side. But yeah, there's a dog head tracked onto my head. Didn't really seem to acknowledge lighting too much.
Yeah. There's things you have to work with to make it happen. But it's the fact that it intelligently motion tracks and intelligently composites and intelligently masks is crazy.
What was that white border around it?
That's just, I think it's guessing where I kind of like painted my boundary and trying to figure out how to like work within that. And I don't have like the full details of how this stuff is working. But what's interesting about this and what's catching my eye about it is that we're like, when you look at like the VFX reels from like ILM or Weta, they're doing so much replacement work, right? Oftentimes they're, creating things from scratch, but a lot of other times they're just replacing something. Like when we looked at Gladiator 2 yesterday for VFX Artist React, and there's a scene where he's fighting baboons. And when he's fighting like the baboons, they filmed him with like, fighting a dude in a gray leotard, and then they had to paint out the guy in the leotard or replace him with a CG model, et cetera, et cetera. But like, what if you could just like eyedropper the guy in the leotard and say, make him a monkey, And there's not these like intense weeks and weeks of work in between those steps of of guy in gray suit to monkey effect.
Yeah, but as usual, the hardest part about that is art direction. It's like,
yes,
it's like, okay, yeah, it worked, but it's not the monkey I wanted. Can I do this other thing instead? It's like, no, sorry. Well then, god dang it.
All right, Christian, I'm sending you a screen capture, which is hopefully an MP4 format, but who knows? It might not be. Either way. Or, the other thing that always comes to mind is the Golden Compass series, the Dark Materials series.
Oh, yeah.
It is. And they to do the little animals, what are they called?
The puppets?
They have like a
they're
like
lore
the daemons.
Daemons.
When an A and an
Damon
E are
Lillard.
like attached as one letter like that, is it pronounced A?
I think so. The AE?
Yeah.
I think that's A. Yeah,
It feels a little pretentious to eliminate this
as opposed to
space.
diamonds.
Like, why not just spell it
Look at those diamonds down
DAEMONS?
there.
Doesn't everybody pronounce DAEMONS the same way as they would if the A and the E are squished together anyways? Diamonds. Anyways, they use real puppets on set with like puppeteers. And they did like a really good job with the motion on set. And then, of course, they had to, replace it with CG. But the whole idea was that you're using the puppets for, like, the motion and the reference. And it's like, once again, what if you could just eyedropper the puppet and say, turn that into the creature?
Yeah.
And, yeah, art direction's a thing, and, like, we're getting there. But being on set with the actual puppet, with the motion, in the moment, perhaps even having it swapped live on screen. It's
that would be the thing.
That's the art direction I'm looking for.
Because then you can actually act across from it. You can... respond to what you're seeing. You can kind of like frame it up a little bit better. Like if you've got like this like stick in your hand and you're pretending it's a snake.
Right.
You're like, okay, it's a stick, but this is supposed to be a snake. And then you look over at the monitor and suddenly you see there's a snake hanging off your hands. Mm-hmm. You could be like, oh, it actually looks better if I hold this up like 3 inches.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just tiny little adjustments like that you can make by just looking at the monitor and be like, okay, this is where the snake would be, guys. Like, this looks good.
Yeah, and
informed intent. That's what I'm always talking about.
Informed intent. That's one of the great things about the volume is you can actually kind of see what's going on with the world around you.
Put it in Google Drive and I can play it.
This is the jankiest way to get a video on screen. Look, guys, we're still figuring it out, okay? We figure it out a little bit every day. You get to see the learning process live. Love how compressed and shitty it is.
Well, I think you get up the...
There it is.
Okay.
Good enough.
I'll probably get that going.
Good enough.
See if I can get that screen cap now.
It's still going black.
Still black screen.
Oh, it's still black screen.
What if you
Oh, no, never mind.
There
Okay.
it is. Okay.
There we go.
All right, are people seeing that now?
Now we're looking.
There we go. Yeah, it's showing up.
Okay, yeah. So, it's like...
I wish I'd have turned my head more because it's kind of tracking my head, but at the same time, the perspective on that dog nose remains exactly, or more or less the same throughout the whole shot.
Yeah, but you're
It
also
does
like...
start a little bit. That's why I'm wondering if I don't remember what the original footage looked like.
Oh, well, whatever. Just imagine that with Wren. It's gonna be too much of a pain to get Wren's video over the screen. But the point I'm trying to make here
It's
is
harder
like,
to see the outline.
you're
around
right.
the
There's
head.
like not a ton of art direction happening here. I could give it a specific picture of a dog, and it would swap your head with that specific picture.
Oh, whoa.
So there is that art direction.
Okay.
And in terms of like,
Okay.
yeah, the acting and performance, it's not like, well, you should stick your tongue out at exactly 2 seconds into the shot. Like it doesn't have that level of nuance or control right now. But I also want to point out that like, I did this in like 5 seconds before the podcast started and did like one try. So it's like,
it took us longer to
Dude,
show
first
you on
take,
the
first
stream.
try.
yeah, they were just saying it took longer.
It took us longer to show it to you on stream than it did to actually do the effect.
You started this during the pre-show,
Yeah, the
pre-show of the
pre-show.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, it's not movie quality or anything like that, but man, in terms of like making a fun video with your kids or something, like, heck yeah, what a crazy tool. And it's only going to get better, right?
Dude.
This is the worst it's ever going to be.
Niko, you made me a golden retriever.
I did actually specifically tell it to make you a golden retriever. But here's the thing, like the mask I drew on your head, maybe it's too small. Maybe that's why it's
you
kind of
drew
locked
a mask
in.
on my head?
Yeah.
So, okay, walk me through that process. You uploaded the video you took on your iPad,
Uh-huh.
and you uploaded it to their app or their web browser?
Their web browser.
Their web browser, and it gave you a few options of what you want to do with it. And one of them was to allow you to paint using your fingertip on the screen where to erase the
Correct.
head,
Yes.
or what to replace.
Yep. Otherwise, you can just specify with text what to replace.
Now, did you just do one stroke on one frame and it extrapolated that across the whole video? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there's little limitations that pop up, right? Like, let's say your subject's not in the first frame of your shot, then you can't paint around it, right?
Oh.
Or there's a question of like when you type in, what to remove rather than painting on it. Is it just doing a mask behind the scenes, using like an automatic like segmentation model, or is it using a different formula? So like, this is still a little bit more consumer facing than like nitty gritty like, VFX artist stuff. But at the same time, like they're building it out, right? They're experimenting. There's not an industry for this yet. There's not established tools. But what I do see here is we have this like imagination filter that's kind of being developed. It's the same thing with animated rock, paper, scissors. It's the same thing when we were training like our pictures into like, stable diffusion. It's one thing to just generate a piece of art from nothing, but more often than not, it's kind of a derivative, blah, middle of the road average thing. It's not like new. It doesn't usually show new ideas when you go to
Yeah.
Midjourney and you just type in,
Yeah.
show me like a cool night. It's like you're going to get a conglomeration of all the art that already exists.
Yeah, just by definition of how it functions.
And also just kind of by definition of being an artist or a creative, that's not interesting, right? I think for most
Sure,
people
yeah.
and people that consume art, it's not interesting to basically just watch a averaged out collage of art that you've already seen, and it's not interesting to make that either.
I mean, that's like part of what drives my whole career is the search of novelty.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's part of what drives people to watch our channel. It's because we try to do new things. So when it comes to these tools, it's when you can say, take a video that you're directing, that you're writing, that has your story, and it's like, okay, but this person he's talking to is a living tiger, or the person has space armor on, or whatever, and it's just highlight, swap. And let's say it's like, it's a specific space armor design that I want. It's like, cool, well, model it, render it, whatever, draw it, take a picture of it, and then let that inform the AI swap that happens. Like, now you're getting into art direction, and now this is basically just a filter on your video, an imagination filter.
Right.
And that's like, it doesn't work for everything, right? You can't just like blow up a house because you need to film something crumbling and blowing up. You can make a miniature, for example, and like, you can't just like invent characters with this, but like, swapping things out, taking care of costumes, taking care of makeup, like it seems really useful for that kind of stuff. Sorry, I'm rambling, but last thing here is Sam and I wrote a Wizard Cops script last year. We
Yeah.
haven't shot it yet.
Wizard Cops 2.
Yes, Wizard Cops 2. And in it, there's zombies. And it's like, okay, well, we can deal with the makeup, right? Which is, there's one thing to like get masks for like background people, but foreground people, you have latex and application and makeup and blood and all that kind of stuff. And it
Yeah.
takes time. And it's like, it's not that big of a deal, but it is a thing that takes time. And with comedy, the key to comedy. One of the things with comedy is that you have a lot of throwaway jokes, right? Like a zombie walks up, says one line, and like that's the joke, and then you never see the zombie again. So it's like having an actor come in for a day and getting all the makeup and everything put on so they look good up close to the camera to come on and like just deliver one joke.
It's got to be a really, really good joke.
It's got to be a really good joke.
It's got to be worth it.
And it's just a lot of work, right? Like anytime you see a comedy and they have people coming and going and saying lines all the time, like each one of those people is like a SAG actor and has to go through clearance. Like it's so much work just to do that stuff. Anyways, where I'm going with this is that if I could instead just take a picture of our zombie mask and then apply it using these tools to that zombie for like the 1 or 2 shots that they're in the piece for, it's like, heck yeah. I have my consistent zombie. I have my actor coming in and doing the take. So there's acting and everything, but it's like, I can just do the makeup digitally now. And I don't have to worry about spending like 4 hours, like putting stuff on their face. So I don't know. There's a lot of really, really, really interesting uses of this kind of stuff. Let me show you one other crazy thing. So
I would love to see another crazy thing, Niko.
So I showed you guys Pika, but there's another model called Hanyan, and Hanyan. Yeah, here start with the yeah.
It has layers.
Either one of those two. Yeah. Okay, let's start with this one. Hanyan is actually let's do the old lady. Hanyan is a open weights model.
What does open weight stand for?
So open source is, you guys heard the term open source. Open source is when the code for your project is available. Generally speaking, the whole thing, right? With AI stuff, people will release the models that they've trained, but they won't always release the code that they use to train the model. Or they might release the code they've used to train the model, but they haven't released the data that the model was trained on, and so on and so forth, right? So open weights is when they've trained the model and they've released the model, but they haven't like given you all the code and all the files, so which is still, fantastic. Open weights is fantastic. So here we have a picture. At the top is the original video, which is just like a dude talking. Let me see if this is on stream here.
It is.
It is? Okay. On top, you have the dude talking. In the middle, he just did went into Photoshop and like swapped his face with like an old lady's face, like the Queen of England, kind of. And then in the bottom is the new video, which is generated using that one frame that he made. And so it's replacing his face with like the old woman's face and generally keeping the motion, generally keeping the lighting. The lip sync isn't quite exactly the same, but that's pretty easy to solve actually. But what I'm seeing here is you just use Runway Act 1.
Okay.
Which is what I used for our AI Scams Part 2 video.
Gotcha.
Runway Act 1 is fantastic for fixing lip sync or redoing lines or puppeteering a face. But this model, Hanyan, is free and it runs in Comfy UI. So you can run this on your PC, assuming you have a semi-decent GPU. Your GPU, I think, needs at least 8 gigs of RAM, if not 16, unless you want to do lower res stuff. So Christian, go to the sci-fi one. Here's another example. So on the top is one video that the guy had.
Whoa.
And the middle is his swapped frame. And then look at that. Look at that interaction. She puts the helmet on.
What the heck?
Yeah. Pretty crazy, huh?
What the heck?
Yeah. And so there's lots of implication for tools like these.
Jan was showing me some stuff that he'd been experimenting with and trying to get the helmet to Iron Man style fold down around the head. It would always get halfway, but it would never do the full closure.
Yeah.
But I see here that the input has the helmet going around it, so it's able to identify the transparency of the glass on the helmet and replace everything within it without getting rid of the glass itself.
Yeah, it's the implication
Maintaining
here
reflections off of it
is that you could film let's say you're filming with actors, right? You do one session where you put them all into makeup, and you you do the full makeup, which takes time. Take your pictures, get your data, and then you film with your actors every day thereafter. They can just show up to set. And you don't have to go through makeup. It's come on to set. Let's just start acting, right? And then let me just use this filter to put all the professional makeup onto you that we would have had to do every morning otherwise, or alien makeup, zombie makeup. De-aging, re-aging.
I can't wait. I can't talk about it at all, but Otoy's got some really cool stuff, and I can't wait for us to do something with them.
Yeah. Another really useful thing here is when you need to make consistent characters and things like that. All right, let's go to that final clip. Or here, for example, Yeah, go to that last one. You know, people clowning on on Drake by replacing it with Kendrick Lamar. Yeah, and it's not just faces, right? It's the whole figure, which is super cool. Like, it's a different sweatshirt and pants style. Like, it fully
I mean,
remapped
kinda. It's pretty close to the same, but it is different technically. There's
It
different
is
folds
different.
in the clothes,
Yeah.
but it's the same style. So I don't know. To me, that just kind of looks like a reimagination to a degree. I mean, obviously the head is completely different.
Yeah, so this is a full-on community-made process here. This is not a
that's
company
cool.
that made this. This is not like somebody trying to run like an AI, service or website. This is Comfy UI and people just experimenting and trying things and doing coding and programming and like making these nodes. Because I think this is a combination of doing an image to video along with something that's called Flow Edit, which basically takes it does optical flow to the
Yeah.
video, and it combines the information of optical flow with the diffusion process, with also the temporally stable or temporally aware video model that is Hunyan as well. So it's all these things coming together. Everybody's just like putting all this stuff together. It's super cool. And shout out to Killjai. He's the guy that does basically all the implementation of like the research projects that come out. He immediately puts them into Comfy UI as like
Okay,
nodes.
sick.
He makes Comfy UI wrappers, and it's awesome. Like, huge moves. Like the whole community here is like on the backs of like 15 to 20 people that are like carrying the whole thing. But yeah, this is like really interesting stuff, and it has a ton of implications. And for me, it's like the implication is that you can still film things and you can still direct. It's just this helps you like polish it and do fixes to your footage. You can paint something out. You can alter something in the shot that's like weird. You need to replace a license plate. You need to replace a TV screen. Now it gives you lighting on the table that the TV is sitting on as well.
Also, it just kind of lowers the boundary of entry for people who don't really want to invest all of the time needed to get into like hardcore visual effects. They just want to make something cool for their kids.
Right.
It's like you can now just like kind of quickly and easily like just make something that's good enough for what you're trying to do, which
Right.
is impress your very easily impressed kids.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. It's just cool. It's just cool to see new tools, and it's cool to see like new ways to visualize stuff, and like kind of bring them to life. And
And of course, it's always going to keep getting better.
Yes.
I guess I'm kind of coming from the standpoint of like it's not at a point where it can replace professional tools yet. So it's still, as it was a couple of years ago, all about trying to find the creative implementations of it. It's like, how can we use this and actually art direct it the way we want to?
yeah, and I feel like the whole industry, including us, for like the past like 8 years or so, went through this cycle of like, how can we make Unreal Engine easier to work with? How can we make filming with visual effects easier to work with? How can we make it easier to do our real life filmmaking in the computer? Because real life filmmaking became this really hard thing with like 50 to 60 pound cameras and giant lenses, and each camera needs a crew of 5 people, and you can't just move it, you can't just place it, you need to put lights down, they're all heavy and they take electrical cables and yada yada. So like filming became a pain in the butt, and so I was like, well, let's just do previs in Unreal Engine. We can put the camera anywhere. We can make things. People do anything. Costumes are free. Just go to the Unreal store and buy them. Etc. And so everybody like started implementing.
They're free, so go buy them.
Whatever. Then you have like the Lion King comes out, and like they have VR headsets, and they've like made all this like camera tracking stuff. Or James Cameron's making Avatar, and like everything's 3D tracked, and
Yeah.
because they're trying to like, it's like, how can you interface with 3D? It's like, well, it's really easy to hold the camera. And now it's like, wait, wasn't the whole point of going to 3D because you didn't have to hold the camera? And even like now, like when we shoot stuff, it's like, well, let me go previs, and it's like, what, the red is like not good enough to previs? Like, no, let me previs it on my phone. It's like, why are you prevising it on your phone? It's like, well, my phone's easy. It's like, well, then why can't the red camera be that easy? Why can't the expensive $20,000 camera be as easy as your phone? And like, I'm constantly running into this now. I'm like dealing with this like internal conflict of like, oh, it'd be really cool to render that or do this in CGI or bring this to life on a green screen. Like, because green screen and tracking is getting so easy these days. It's like, oh, make a whole movie that takes place on a green screen. But it's like, but what's really easy is getting perfect real-time rendering for my phone by filming things in real life. And if the shot's not good, I just verbally talk to my friends in the shot and we do it again right then and there and get it right.
Right.
Versus like doing it on the computer, futzing around the keyframes. Like, it's just easiest to do it in real life with a phone, and like no one's in costume.
It's that iterative feedback loop when you can just quickly and easily change stuff and move on from it. You can kind of like narrow in what you're going for.
Right. Exactly.
That's part of that, like, creative process of creating.
And when I see these kind of tools, like the Hwanyan video like replacement or Pika additions and swaps, those tools are letting me just shoot things on my iPhone. Like those tools are creating a new workflow or pipeline where it's like, no, just shoot it on your iPhone. Shoot it the easiest way possible with your friends outside on your phone. Don't worry about anything else. Just get the story out, get the acting out, get the editing, the rhythm, the direction. And then later on, it's like, oh, okay, you need a spaceship there. Gotcha. We can do that. I'm glad you put a cardboard box there. It's like, oh, your friend needs to be looking like Master Chief. Not a big deal. We can do that. At least, at least he was doing the actions and holding a fake rifle or whatever. It's like, that sounds super cool. And I feel like that's the direction where everything's going. It is going to be weird, though, having visual effects, like big visual effects, no longer being like the calling card of what makes an expensive film.
Sure.
Just like having video was the calling card of like, oh, that takes resources and it's expensive. Like literally just talking into a professional microphone on a camera, I was like, that's a person of authority. And people still abuse that all the time. Yeah. But it's the cultural shifts. It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
VFX.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing reports of like these VFX houses starting to kind of go down. I saw Technicolor
mill.
lay off a bunch of people. Yeah, the mill.
The mill went down.
And it's
Technicolor went down, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like I keep seeing all these posts from visual effects artists who are just out of work and haven't been able to find work. It's like when the strikes hit, everything kind of just slowed down, and it hasn't quite gotten back to that. And then as this AI stuff is taken off, it's like, oh boy, it's tough out there. So yeah. On the one hand, I'm super excited about these new tools making it really easier to like do what I want to do, which is to make a video, convey a point, tell a story, share something that I'm passionate about, and the tool is just part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always enjoyed the tools, and there's a whole industry of people who rely on those tools.
Right.
And so when those tools go away, does that mean it's better because those people can then now make their own thing faster because they already understand the theory behind those tools to begin with?
I mean, that would be like the utopian philosophy behind it, is that every artist can just go make what they want to make. But that's not quite how real life works. Then every artist is looking to be their own individual voice creator, which I totally get. But that's not to say, like, groups of people still make things that the individual can't make, regardless of whatever tool is out there.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
It's like, let's say your car can only go 30 miles an hour, and I give you a new car and it can go 100 miles an hour. Are you still going to drive that new car at 30 miles an hour? No, you're going to go faster. And that's what happens with these new tools. It's not like everyone's like, oh, okay, cool. Everything looks about as good as it did in the mid-90s. We'll just leave it there. It's like, no, like we're going to crank it up. Like, people are going to demand more. People are going to try new things. But there is a shift that happens. And like the VFX industry as it is now is very much built on like film technology and what happened 30 years ago with like the addition of computers into visual effects. Like there wasn't really that much of a visual effects industry in the 80s. And there wasn't any visual effects industry in the 70s. It was just like kooky craftsmen in their like warehouses in LA that sometimes got picked up for things.
It was always like a bespoke thing. It was like, all right, you need to invent what we need for our movie.
Yeah.
It was like that for a couple decades before finally it was like, all right, I think we've invented enough stuff. We can just like use the stuff now.
Yep. So when computers became ubiquitous and you could start running 3D animation stuff on just normal PCs rather than like, custom-made bespoke $50,000 workstations, like that's when the VFX industry became a thing. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't that long ago. That was the mid-90s, and here we are. And like times change, technology changes. That technology that blew in that prosperous VFX industry is now shifting. And yeah, I can see why. I mean, when Sam and I got into Los Angeles and we wanted to make movies, we were very like anti-establishment. I still am. Like,
you don't say.
But seriously, like the way people did things here was very inefficient, and it was very like gatekeepy and very closed off, and not at all like about the kind of filmmaking that I was into. It's like I grew up just going and shooting things with my friends, and suddenly out here people are like, you can't do that anymore. It's not okay. And I'm like, no, fuck that. And like, there's a balance. Like, yeah, don't go do dangerous things in public, of course. But, even just like filming in your building without without anybody else around and not disturbing your neighbors, it's like that's technically illegal in Los Angeles. And like there's all these like restrictions, and like somebody can't say a line in your film if it's a union SAG film unless they are SAG, and the moment they say a line you have to pay them $600. Like, and once again, I get the system around that, but that system's built for an old way of making movies, and that system isn't changing, and they're going to keep it that way because everybody wants money. And the only way those things change is when those institutions crumble, because that's how they've set themselves up. They don't set themselves up to flex or evolve. They set themselves up to stay rigid until they can no longer stand up and they crumble. And you have big industries and big shops that are built around the classic Hollywood model and putting millions of dollars into films and blockbusters, and that's just simply changing.
Yeah.
And when you have an industry that requires a minimum $500 per VFX shot, even if it's just a camera stabilization shot, something you do as a filter, and resolve, it's like that industry is going to fall apart. Things are going to change, Yeah,
what was that? What project was it? Was it Lifeline, or was it no?
Rush.
It was Rush.
Battlefield Rush.
Where there's a bunch of you're going through a more traditional pipeline, and you have these shots that are relatively simple VFX shots, like 5-minute VFX.
You do
shots.
them in the edit.
Yeah, like the warp stabilizing shots. Literally, it's like just stabilize this a tiny bit. Literally, just one button click in Premiere Pro, and you're done. But because of the workflow, you had to catalog that shot as a VFX shot. It had to get exported and sent to the VFX house for them to then do the effect, export it, send it for review, get it all re-uploaded, and integrated into the edit, all that stuff, approval, and just to do all of that, just bare minimum entry, doesn't matter how much work goes into it, $500 per shot.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention that the whole workflow they have set up is around an older traditional process. And like right now you might be like, well, yeah, let me just export the shot or whatever. Like the way they set up the project is first they took all the footage we filmed. It was all red code raw, pretty high compression rate.
Oh no, don't tell me they
anamorphic, by the way. So it's actually tiny files,
Yeah,
playback real time.
red code is the best code.
And they transcode everything to proxies, all the ProRes, bulk up these hard drives with it, right? Super inefficient. And they edit from the proxies that anytime you want to like change the footage, got to relink the proxy to the red code file. And straight up center, like, why are you doing this? We told you guys we want to do the whole thing in red code raw. We shot the thing so you could just edit the native raw footage so that there's none of this BS that slows things down.
Yeah.
Because truly we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on just juggling hard drives and footage and shots.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars on hard drives?
Think about it this way. You have to hire an assistant editor and an editor, and you have to have a server just to deal with file swaps, right? Like if I want to like, oh, that file doesn't work, I need to swap it out, or I want to change the white balance, or I want to see like a color grade. It's like, hold on, I have to have the assistant editor export the EDL. I have to online the files. Like
time.
Yeah. It's maybe not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's probably $50,000 to $100,000.
Man.
Right? And then granted, like R3Ds and working with R3Ds in Premiere had only been a thing for maybe 4 years by that point.
But not
only
like
been a thing for 4 years.
But not brand new.
Not brand
It had
new.
been multiple years at that point.
But when you think of it in terms of established industries, 4 years is brand new, right?
Sure.
Like a new medical procedure comes out in 4 years, you're not going to see it in every doctor's office. It takes a little while.
To just point out real quick about Red Code, it's the raw video codec made by Red cinema cameras, and
which somehow they got a patent for compressed raw, and nobody else has been able to.
And so, if you know anything about raw photos or raw video, the file sizes are huge because it's saving all of the information for all the possible white balances, all the possible tints, all the possible ISOs, and it's all just storing it so you can choose after the fact how bright the image to make, or to make the image, and like white balance, tint, all that stuff. And you can do that for video as well. But Red Code was a codec that was able to do all of that, shooting at high resolution. We're talking like 6K resolution. And the files were like the size of 1080p files from a cinema camera.
Right.
Just like as 8-bit.
Yeah, and you can change anything at any
You can
time.
change
Color
anything.
spaces.
And on top of that, if you just had any consumer, like relatively modern consumer GPU from NVIDIA, it ran that stuff in real time. You can edit that stuff with, like scrub through the footage in the edit without it like being clunky or taking a while to load and all that stuff. It edited like it was really lightweight video files. I loved that. And we lost that.
We did, well, because Red has a patent on that format, so nobody else can put it on
Well,
the
now
canvas.
Nikon has that patent because they bought Red.
Yes.
But are they even using red code in any of their
Yes,
Nikon cameras?
yes, they actually are.
Good. Okay, good. But none of the cameras like Canon doesn't have it. Blackmagic doesn't have it. Blackmagic does have
Blackmagic does have their own
does have
thing.
it raw, but it's not red code.
It's not red code. It is compressed. Somehow
Is it as good as red code?
It's actually about as good as red code.
Okay, then never mind.
Yeah, Blackmagic. Somehow, I love them. I love Blackmagic. Hey, don't get me wrong. The red camera's really nice too.
No, but yeah. But we love Blackmagic. We're fans.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize their raw codec, their B-raw was
B-raw.
on the level of red code.
And for what's worth, Blackmagic's color managed color grading pipeline in DaVinci Resolve, when set up correctly, effectively turns every camera into raw. And how you can manipulate colors scientifically and have them be accurate. It's
Is that the Aces workflow?
Aces is the same. Aces is the same thing, but Resolve has their own proprietary color managed workflow, which
I
is
understand. What's the
based
name
off.
of it?
It's Blackmagic color managed workflow.
Oh,
Just literally, it's
gotcha.
that's
I thought
the
it
option.
had a cooler name.
No, it's the option.
I
in the
thought it
menu.
had a cool name.
I mean, it's basically the same idea as Aces, which is you take all your footage, you put it into a standardized, full wide gamut, linearized, mega floating point color space. Basically, full scientific accuracy color space, and you can put it out to whatever you want. Aces is great. The Blackmagic one has more flexibility to bring in more camera types. and
Oh,
footage
interesting.
types.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was because it was made by Blackmagic and they make DaVinci Resolve, and so the integration level there I thought might be part of it.
Also part of it. Yeah.
So is it easier than Aces in that regard, just from a compatibility
I would say
standpoint?
so.
Okay.
Because, like, for example, finding like an Aces profile for a GoPro is a bit of a pain in the butt.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Especially from like GoPros that were around when like Aces was just being invented too.
Oh, okay, okay.
But in
sure.
general, yeah, it's like not every company has an Aces profile. Even like Canon's got a billion different Canon profiles, and yeah. Anyways, yeah. So where were we going? I guess we were talking about the industries, and I mean, Final Cut Pro 7. People are on that. Like,
for a long time after.
yeah, Final Cut Pro 7 like pioneered like the timeline editing that we all kind of use today. I mean, it wasn't the first nonlinear editor, but it was like,
I mean, Avid was the industry choice for
Yes.
a while. And
Yes.
Final Cut 7 kind of came in, and people were like, wait, I can just edit something on my MacBook?
well, exactly. Final Cut 7 was like the first, just like, I mean, so many programs like the first in terms of like just being on a PC, right? Because like up until like the late 90s, early 2000s, you had to buy special hardware to do these things. And Final Cut Pro was the first non-linear editor outside of iMovie, technically, that
And
could
Windows
run
Movie Maker.
on a home computer. Because the other Avid required special hardware,
Yeah. And to be clear, like there were other editing programs at the time.
Media 100.
And
Adobe Premiere was out then too, actually.
yeah, but like none of them were as good as Final Cut 7. Like
Oh, yeah, it came out-
Final Cut finally like kind of like took all of the upsides of the pro editing
Well,
software.
Final Cut 3 was the big one.
Well, sure. I'm just saying Final Cut in general. I didn't
Final
mean to
Cut
say 7.
in general. Yeah.
But like they're like, oh, what if we made like what if we made iMovie better?
Right. It's kind of, yeah, it's like, wait a minute. We don't need to have specialized hardware. We're Mac engineers. We should be able to just make a basic database spreadsheet that can visualize like timelines. So they did.
But then it was around like what, 2011, 2012 when it was like Final Cut 10 came out.
Final Cut 10 came out in
Final
like
Cut
2009 or 10.
It was a little after. It was around when I graduated college. So
Okay.
yeah, maybe 2010.
And everyone was so pissed off.
Yeah, and that was when we started seeing the max exodus from Final Cut to Premiere.
Yep.
And that's what we did.
Yep.
We all went to,
Yeah, we were
Premiere
Mac
Pro.
boys. It's
We
worth mentioning,
worked on all of our nice PCs.
you had
Worked with
you had to
graphics
render
cards.
every codec that wasn't ProRes for Final Cut Pro. Do you remember that? MP4s, MP3s, any codec that wasn't in like ProRes or other like easy edit codecs,
Okay.
you had to re-render or you had to render in timeline.
I gotta be honest, I've never actually used Final Cut.
Okay. Well, needless to say, Final Cut Pro 7 was great for its time in 2005. But by the time Sam and I were out here in LA doing VFX and working on our own projects, and we had moved on to Premiere, and we could just import whatever codec we wanted into the timeline and it worked. You'd have MP3s in your timeline. Imagine that. By the time that had happened, everybody else was still on Final Cut Pro 7. And we'd work on projects and be like, hey, we have a Premiere file. And they'd be like, we can't take that. We need a Final Cut Pro 7 file. I'm like, guys, Final Cut Pro 7 stopped being updated like 5 years ago. Why is everybody still using this? I thought these were professional
Because they're like,
houses.
it's what I know.
Well, yeah, it's the industry standard. It's like, guys, the industry never stands still. There's no standards. Standards exist for about 4 years in the industry. But anyways, it's like, yeah, it's a really tricky space being in film because software is always changing. And if you're trying to build an industry around software and around pipelines, like the pipelines themselves they're like factory lines, right? You suddenly realize, like, oh, we can replace this part with a robot. No, we got a new molding process over here. Now that part gets faster. And if your whole industry is built around having slow factory lines, there's like one certainty in life, which is like factory lines get faster. Technology moves forward, and so that means your industry is going to have to like deal with that, and it's tough. But the VFX industry and the whole like post production industry is dealing with that, and they're dealing with the loss of gatekeeping around high end media. Everybody can make high end media now. It's not a special thing relegated to one group of people. Now, making good high end media is still special and hard to do.
That's an important clarification. I think
It's a
people
very
sometimes
important
forget about.
clarification.
Just because you can do high level media doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's the big thing at the end of the day, like when people freak out about AI, that I constantly turn back to is we already have more media than we can digest. We already had more media than we could digest before AI existed. Like YouTube was having more content uploaded to it like in an hour than somebody could watch in their entire lifetime. So we already literally had infinite media, and we've already invented ways to filter it. And we like and before YouTube, it was books, right? We still have a way of like just somehow the good books rise to the top.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay if there's a bajillion videos out there. It's okay. The good ones will still rise to the top. It always happens. People want to watch cool stuff. It's just you're gonna have less like kings and queens of the kingdom,
Sure. And a lot more slog to get through.
A lot more dukes and duchesses.
The royal family is growing.
Yeah. And yeah, we've mostly switched out of Adobe here, except we use After Effects once in a while. It's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Even though it crashes still all the time.
I
sat down with
almost
Casey
never
Ferris to like show him how to do muzzle flashes or how I did muzzle flashes.
Uh-huh.
And After Effects literally crashed within the first 5 seconds.
Really?
It was like, oh no. And then I did the process. We got through it and it crashed again and I lost all my work.
Oh my God. You didn't save?
I mean, I was just messing around in a file and
Yeah,
showing
I
stuff.
know,
But
I
still,
know.
it's like, come on.
That's what you say that. I'm like, I haven't really had a crash in a little while. It does happen. It happens like periodically. It's not like something, it's never really random. You'll have a crash and you'll have a crash that kind of just sticks with you for a couple weeks. And it's just like some sort of bug. And then eventually like something gets changed, something gets updated, and it kind of just goes away and you forget it ever existed.
Yeah. You don't need to use Adobe for editing. There's no reason to use Adobe for editing.
Yeah.
Resolve is not
free.
hard to learn. It will take you literally an hour, if not less. I'm kind of talking to the chat and a little bit at Christian.
Oh, right.
Kind of looking through the chat at Christian.
Oh, you can see Christian? Christian, how you doing, man?
Good. I'm chilling. Yeah, I mean, I want to make the switch. I just have to make time for it.
Yeah.
And that's always the hard thing about like learning new software is that you're like, okay, I have to invest time into this. It's not like a money thing. It's like a time thing. And it's like, okay, you just got to start slowly and just put a little bit of time here and there and just through consistency, it adds up. But it's always so intimidating being like, I guess I'll try this now.
Yeah. I think at the end
But
of the
Resolve
day,
is easy to learn.
if any of you guys have a job that involves using computers as like your main tool, I feel like the most important skill to have is not learning the software that you're using, but learning how to learn software and learning how to learn
100%.
programs. Because your software's always changing, and if you know how to change yourself with it, you will be always faster and always more efficient. Always deadlier. Yeah. Regret missing this one. Not trying to push you too hard, but I am going to push you a little bit. It's a nice shirt.
You will really, really regret it.
New
if you
t-shirt,
miss
new
out.
hoodie.
We're all going to wear this shirt all the
All
time.
your
at
friends will
Corridor.
make fun of you if you don't get it.
You are a bad person if you don't buy the shirt.
Your parents will be disappointed in you.
But we will like you a lot if you buy the shirt. But for real, it's a really nice shirt. Check it out. Yeah.
I've had a lot of I feel like that was kind of a philosophical conversation a little bit stemming from just some cool tools.
Dude, I'm always philosophizing.
Do you want to philosophize about Onewheel stuff?
Yeah, I would love to. Guys, the ADV2 came out from Tony, the float wheel. It's like the VESC open source DIY version of the Onewheel,
Except it's an actual product,
except it's an actual product.
which
and
is technically illegal here in the United States.
because Onewheel has the patent on self-balancing boards.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about Onewheels in a little while. Honestly, I haven't.
Please don't
even-
leave. We'll make it interesting for everybody, I promise.
I haven't really. I mean, I still one wheel a lot. Like we go do a night ride on a mountain somewhere at least once a week. Still,
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it's down to about once a week or less, because it's just hard for me to make time for it now. But because of my focus on my boxing training and whatnot, just it's fully encompassing my intention, and so I don't even really have time to think about other hobbies. Even though I still will try to carve out a night where I'm like, I'm just gonna go ride tonight, but I'm still riding like the same board I had last year, and which is a great board. It's very good. Meanwhile, you're updating to the new, the hot newness,
ADV2.
the new hotness.
Yes,
I
the
said
new
that
hotness.
backwards. I think
The hot newness?
the hot newness.
No, the new hotness is how people say it. Yeah. So they Future Motion, which is based in America, makes the one wheel, and that's what we got our start on. You got your start in the very first one they made, the V1.
V1, yeah.
I got started on the Plus, which is the second one they made, and then quickly jumped to the XR, which is basically just a bigger battery. At the time, it was amazing. You get 12 miles. Oh my god.
Yeah. Which was a big deal.
And they're pricey machines. They're $2,000 basically.
They got pricier as time went on. Like
Yeah, the XR was
V1
like-
the V1 when it first came out was $1,500, and that was a lot of money. It was more expensive than the other electric skateboards on the market. Like the boosted
Yeah.
boards were around $1,000.
Yeah.
And yeah, then the XR I think was $1,800 for a while. Then
Yep.
the GT came out
That's
in
2,200.
2021 or 22. 21, and yeah, it's 2,200.
And for
the
something
GTS came out a couple years ago, and that was 2,800. No, it was
pretty
3,200.
pricey. That's very pricey for what it is.
It was like, yeah, it was over $3,000. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, one wheels are on this like borderline between toys and like actual transportation devices, kind of like a scooter.
It's yeah, and that's so funny. Like you meet people out in the wild, and for years it was always like, "Hey, did you make that?"
Yeah.
Like that was the universal question. It was like, "Hey, did you make that?" And that went away as more and more people had at least seen them in
Yeah.
pop culture or on the internet or in real life. But every time, still without fail, they ask, "How much is it?" And you
Right.
tell them it's a couple $1,000s, and they're like,
"Ugh."
"What?"
Yeah.
They scoff so hard because in their eyes it is a toy,
Right.
and toys aren't worth that much money.
It's like
in
how
our
much-
eyes, it's a vehicle. You don't scoff at a couple $1,000s for like a dirt bike.
Right.
That's a machine.
Right. But the thing is, like, when you look at the one wheel, it's like a board and a tire in the middle.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
a skateboard. Like, if somebody's like, "Oh, this electric skateboard cost me $3,000," be like, "Are you insane?" Like, unless it has like the craziest suspension on it. Like, it's just a board with some tires and a motor, and like that's kind of what a one wheel is. So
Yeah.
Future Motion one wheels are expensive. They do have like the whole Pint series, which is a little bit more affordable.
And the new XR Classic, which I honestly think is probably their best board.
Yeah, and of course there's used one wheels all over the place.
Anytime anyone asks me like which board do I get, I say go on like Facebook Marketplace or just Craigslist and just find a used board.
By the way, buy in person. Do not have them ship it to you. You'll get scammed.
Yes, that is
Always
also
buy
very
in
true.
person.
Also, make sure they have a charger with it. If they're just selling you a board without a charger, chances are they stole that board.
Yep.
So, but yeah, but the point being is that kind of like the used car market, you can get a very good car at like half the price of a brand new one
Yes.
by just buying it used.
And that's one of the things, like, so I'm riding this ADV2, this new float wheel, and this thing is the most powerful board on the market. It's got the most range of any board on the market, outside of like the very outlier fringe engineering projects that we've gotten to actually play with here and there.
Yeah.
Like the VOW.
The VOW board, yeah.
The Dragon Slayer. But beyond that, yeah, the ADV2 is like the most powerful board on the market. And the thing is, the more powerful the board is, the safer it is. Because when you're on a self-balancing device, if you lean too far over and the device doesn't have enough power to balance you, it falls over and you fall over and hurt yourself. Also in LA, we like to ride up the mountains, and mountains are mountains.
Mountains
They
are mountains.
They take a lot of energy to go up. For anyone who's ever tried to bike up a mountain, you would know.
Or even just hiking. It's like, it's one thing to hike across the land. It's another to hike up a mountain. You know the difference when you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing about the ADV2 and the float wheels in general is that if you've never ridden a one wheel before and you want to get into the sport, the float wheels are cheaper than Future Motion one wheels, but there's a little bit of DIY. Not that much. You have to basically attach the motor to the board, but then you get to have control over all the settings. And if you've never ridden a one wheel before and you don't know what the settings should be and you don't know what it should feel like,
Yeah.
you know.
I never recommend a vest or a float wheel to anyone as their first board.
Yeah, I think if any of you
It's
guys,
still just it's not much anymore. Like I think even the ADV2 comes pre-programmed.
yes,
You don't have to program it
I didn't
anymore.
program mine. I did no calibrations. I just
Which
turned
is
it
like
on.
just starting to approach the threshold of ease of use, where
Mm-hmm.
it could be. I mean, the ADV2 has some issues that I want to talk about here in a moment. But yeah, like people are like, "Oh, go VESC." VESC standing for the open source one wheel type controller, and it's like you have to have experience on a board at the very least to be doing that.
Yeah.
Because especially when it comes to like, all right, now it's like making a PC. You know, it's a thing. It's a commitment. And more than that, imagine if the PC broke on you, you fell and broke an arm. So there's stakes involved. You have to make sure it's right.
Yeah, I love that. My friend has a Pine, but currently lives in Greenland. Most likely the only one wheel in Greenland.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody listening to this, if you're considering like a one wheel or a float wheel,
ADV.
ADV.
Very. See, Mike.
If it's your very first one, consider buying used. You can buy a used float wheel. You know, it's already assembled and probably working. You can buy a used XR, a used GT. I'd recommend going there. I wouldn't buy a used GTS. I'd
No.
start with a GT or an XR.
But honestly, if you want to get a new board, I totally get it, because you want to get that fresh feeling, fresh out of the box.
Yeah.
0 miles. It's a brand new thing. It's only ever been used by you. If you want to go for a new board, honestly, I think the One Wheel XR Classic is the way to go, because it's basically the culmination of all of the engineering that Future Motion has done to this
It's
point.
basically a GT and an
It
XR
is.
body.
No, well, that's partly why I like it. It is literally a GT in the body of an XR, which was a much lighter, slimmer profile. That was, I think, a little easier to ride around. It's lighter weight than the GT, but it has the same amount of power as a GT.
I should warn people that Future Motion is not known for being the best when it comes to repairing your board if you're not
Yeah.
in California.
They'll
They'll fix your board, but you have to ship it in for hundreds of dollars, and then they'll quote you on a price which you really have no control over, and then you have to agree to pay it and get your board shipped back for another $100. It's rough. It's not.
yeah, it's a bit of a thing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thing. Whereas with like a VESC system, like a float wheel, you can just order the parts and swap it yourself.
But it also requires you know what the heck you're doing.
Yes, or at least somebody around you who's in electronics can help you out.
Yeah.
You know, repairman can help you out. But once again, that's why we kind of recommend if you're just starting out, buy a used board, make sure you like it, get a feel for it, and then make the jump into a float wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I 100% recommend that route. Because once you've tried it out and you've ridden it a little bit and you got your head wrapped around it and how it works, you can make a jump into a VESC from there, as long as it's like approachable like a float wheel is.
It's kind of like how when you want to buy a tool, you buy it from dang it, I'm blanking on the name of the store. Friggin' Harbor Freight. Mm-hmm. You buy the tool from Harbor Freight, you use it. It's not a good quality tool, but it works.
Yeah.
And then when you realize, oh, I've been using this a bunch and it's starting to break down, or maybe even not, you just know you're going to keep using it, then you buy the good tool from Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. You spend a little bit more money on the
Yeah.
nicer version of the tool. And that's what, I mean, the reason why we are so into VESC and so into like the new stuff is because I think we've maxed out what Future Motion is like providing, which is a very streamlined experience, more than just the vehicle itself. The integrated app, just how everything just kind of works. Granted that changes when things break down, but you know, it's a no fuss sort of option. But you're limited on some of those like settings, some of the controls, being able to do specific things you want. Granted, they have gotten way better over the last couple of years about bringing a lot of those features from the VESC side of things into their current firmware. Like I have yet to update my, I have yet to VESC my GT because I updated it, and it feels like a VESC now. I love it. Granted, I also have a separate GTV, which is the main board I ride because it is a VESC.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the ADV2 is the second generation of the ADV1. It's the same name. It's the same external hardware for the most part. Same rails, foot pads, tire. Motor is mostly the same. Magnets are different, I believe.
Yep, curved magnets now.
It's the same battery, but the battery
No.
management system...
Battery's bigger. It's a bigger battery. I got 10% more battery than you now.
Let me rephrase. It's the same battery size. I think they're different cells. They're different. It's a different cell chemistry.
Right.
So I guess they have more... That's right. No, it is. They have more capacity, so inherently less power output as well, though.
Less power output.
That's the trade-off with that type of chemistry change.
But the big thing is the BMS.
And the controller.
Yeah.
has double the amount of MOSFETs on
Oh,
it,
yeah,
so
so you
it
can-
generates less heat.
Less heat, which is awesome.
So that means you can go faster uphill or up a longer hill.
we did a mountain climb and we checked, and mine was basically still ambient temperature.
This is a cold board.
So one of the things about electric devices, if you guys ever are riding on one, a self-balancing one, is that, you know, if the system can cut the power from the battery to the controller, that's not good news, because it means that a computer glitch or a battery cell dying could cause the thing to turn off. And that was one of the issues with the first float wheel, the ADV1, is that the battery management system was set up to cut off power from the battery if any of the cells dropped below a certain level. And that's usually a thing you find in every battery. And this is good to know, because it's like, this is good just general battery safety and understanding how batteries work. When you're discharging a battery, the fancy ones like lithium ion or lithium polymer, like the ones on our phones and our laptops, if the battery gets too discharged and then you try to charge it up again, it can blow up and start on fire. And so they have battery management systems which will measure like, oh, the battery's voltage is getting too low, I'm going to cut power. Or likewise, oh, it's trying to charge, but the battery's voltage is too low, I'm going to cut power. Thing is, on a self-balancing board, you would rather have the board not cut power and keep your bones intact, and maybe one of your battery cells dies, than to have it cut power because a battery cell suddenly drops below 2.7 volts. And that was one of the flaws with the first ADV. And the Onewheels don't have that issue. They've built that in so that if, say, a battery cell dies while you're riding, and the rest of them are still working, your battery's putting out power, but like one of the cells has died, the board won't just turn off because one of the cells is now below the threshold of voltage. It'll actually warn the board. It'll do this whole tilt back, and it does this like graceful shutdown. And in the VEST community, the way to deal with that is to have what's called a charge-only BMS, meaning that you do not give the battery management system authority over cutting power for any reason at all.
Yeah.
The board stays on no matter what. The problem with that is if your board, while it's on the crate from China to America, gets turned on while in that crate and starts pulling battery, at no point will the battery management system ever shut it off, and it will drain the battery all the way down.
All the way to 0 volts. And to be clear, on these batteries, 0% charge is not 0 volts.
Right.
Usually for a lithium-ion battery, it starts at 4.2 volts and it gets down to roughly around 3 volts, a little under, depending on the cell you're using. And that's considered 0%, even though there's still a few volts of power left, of charge left on the battery. But if it starts going lower than that, you start damaging the cell structure inside, like the membranes get these dendrites, and it can cause problems.
Dendrites.
When it
I hate
starts getting
dendrites.
So now it's like real low charge, and then you try to put power back into that, it can't just expand. It's like if you bend a paper clip, you can't just bend it back and hide that bend you just added
Right.
into it. That is permanent
That's a
damage,
great metaphor.
plastic deformation in the thing. And so you kind of get it back. Now imagine you're like, oops, I bent the paper clip, but I need to get it back, and you do it really quickly. You snap the paper clip from fatigue.
Yes.
And that's kind of what happens when you take a board that had all of the cells that were dead in it and you charge it up anyway.
So a couple people have been getting dead boards because they turned on during transit, theoretically. And most people are part of the one-wheel community, so they've seen that, okay, if you get a dead board, plug it in for a moment so it turns on, check the battery cells. If they're above 2.5 volts, which is the spec for the manufacturer, charge it, let it balance, pay attention to it, keep an eye on it, etc.
Yeah.
But it might be okay. If your board is below 2.5 volts, they're shot.
Yep.
Take that battery out. Do not try to charge it.
Yep.
Nothing's going to happen.
Put it in like a tub of salt water.
And supposedly since then, new boards that are being shipped have had this problem solved. The theory was that static electricity was making the charging computer turn on in the
is that what
charge
it
port.
was?
Yeah, so when
Allegedly.
so when the charge port detects electricity, it turns the board on so that it can manage all the charging.
Oh, no.
And so theoretically, static electricity from the board's rubbing would send a little spark and boop, turns on the board and then just sits there on while it's in the crate until it dies. Because the auto turn off, the 30 minutes of like no activity turn off, requires a motor to tell if the board is moving. And so when the boards are shipped, they're disassembled, there's no motor. So the 30-minute turn off limit doesn't kick in while it's in the crate.
Oh, really?
These are the cool little like logistics things that you learn about like supply chain stuff that like I mean, I'm not aware of it with anything else, but like paying attention to like the float wheel stuff, he's like, oh man, all these little problems that he only solved by just doing it and learning about it and having mistakes.
Now, someone took a board that was low like that and they charged it up
without knowing or checking how low the cells were.
Yeah, and then they went on a ride and they got several miles out of the ride before the board caught on fire.
Yep.
The battery cells burst, and then the gas that's expending outwards catches on fire, and then the whole thing is on fire now. And I saw a picture of it after it had been burned out. The bumpers and foot pads were completely burned away. You see the husk of the rails and the motor itself, not even the tire around it. Oh my God. See, you know, people love to give Future Motion a hard time and root on Tony. And I'm a big Tony fan, don't get me wrong, but he is not facing the same type of domestic risk that Future Motion does. If they had shipped a board that did that, they would get sued out of existence.
Well, they are being sued by many people.
Because they're getting, their boards are not even at that level. That's a company ending type of problem if you're having Onewheels explode out in the wild. I mean, it is literally single-handedly the thing that killed the hoverboard industry, is because a couple of them caught fire at an airport and now they're banned everywhere, pretty much. And Future Motion's like, well, we don't want that to happen. That might be bad for business. So they have to put in all of these sort of checks and balances to make sure that like stupid people don't do stupid things, because that's what stupid people do. Despite, you know, and so, and so they have to put all of these sort of checks on them, like, okay, all these safety precautions and whatnot. And then in comes this other guy just releasing stuff that technically is more powerful board, more range, in a lot of people's eyes, better product, but without any of the sort of...
Yeah, you're a little bit on the frontier.
Yeah, and potentially there's a problem where, like, what if that burned down a school or something like that? Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but like, suddenly it puts it on the map, and now Onewheel is getting the heat for this third-party product that is blatantly copyright infringing.
Now, Tony is taking this very seriously. Tony's the guy that makes float wheel. Yeah,
because I think he also knows this is not good.
Yeah, he knows it's a big deal. And it's also something that, like, even if in a charge-only BMS, there should be a trigger in there that prevents you from charging the board if the cells are below a certain level. But he did have this. So the guy who's wheeled it on fire got in contact with Tony, the guy who runs Float Wheel. And Tony sent him this long email kind of describing in detail what they're all doing. I want to read a little bit here because I'd love to see this from like other companies.
Yeah, the transparency here is great. I do really like that.
So he wrote emails, immediate actions we are taking, full refund on your order, priority product replacement, brand new wheel will be shipped via air freight within 24 hours, a transparent investigation process. Their BMS development team and ESC development team are analyzing the probable cause for it. They're paying them for his assistance and going and getting the pieces from the fire department so they can analyze it. They say, we commit to providing you with written progress updates every 72 hours with a final investigation report delivered no later than 2nd March. Once we find out the root cause for the incident, we will do a recall for all affected ADV2 riders. It's like, all right, that's a good response. That's the kind of response I'd like to see, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways, my board still had half charge when I got it, so I was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got expedited
you got
shipping.
an air shipment too,
I got
right?
air shipped, yeah. So...
but he could have sent out a little bit of a warning because he knew about this problem ahead of time. But also people give that same flack to Future Motion for like their foot pad problem. Like,
I mean, they had that foot pad problem. They also had a crimped wire that would cause boards to just simply turn off. Yeah.
On the pint?
On the pint.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And they never told people about that.
Yeah, but that's where it's complicated because you kind of, it's like this fine dance you're having to do where you want to address the problem without coming out and stating that, yes, we acknowledge this is a problem, because that will draw more attention and more suits and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's hard. And so they finally got to a point where it's like, yeah, we have to actually recall the foot pads on the GT. Yeah, they are.
That was pretty
it's
rough.
bad enough that we have to actually
Jan's
do
got
something about
stuck.
that now.
Jan's got stuck like the day he got it. I remember doing that, like testing it out, and it just zzz, like whoop. Yeah, you know, to like as much as we want to get like Float Wheel flack for that burning wheel, like Future Motion's had a lot of problems too, and that's just like self-balancing boards, man. That's life with batteries and motors, and you got to ship it, and you're gonna make mistakes. It's human, and you got to fix it, and try to navigate that correctly.
You also gotta minimize the risk.
No, you're right. You
for-
have to
for
put effort
human
into
life,
it, 100%.
which means you gotta make sure your board's not gonna explode.
Yeah.
Like-
Anyways, ADV2 ride in range, fantastic. It's the best. It's lovely.
It's still a very heavy board.
It's only like 37 pounds.
It's a little bit more than that.
It's
closer to
actually a
40.
little bit lighter than the first ADV.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah. Pints are cool. I find them too small personally, but for some people they're perfect.
Every now and then I start dreaming about like the board I want, and that changes all the time. Usually I want a board that's not going to overheat when I go 10 miles straight up a hill.
Yeah.
Like
Which is very
I want
unique
to
to
go
you.
up. And I know, and I've already like made schematics on like these special boards that I want to like build because they'll be possible. Like I want to build in air cooling into the controller in the front and all of this stuff so that I won't overheat. But I just apart from the not having enough time to really even think about that stuff these days, I kind of want to like design my own rails and my own controller housing so I can make a tiny one wheel that is still the same sort of profile as an XR. So I don't lose foot pad space, but I want it to be the lightest possible board. Because I'd miss the days of the V1 when the board weighed like 20 pounds. My V1 is so lightweight. It's shocking. It's literally half the weight of a float wheel. But it could also only go like 5 miles. So part of me wants to get like, I want to just put together a custom board that is very, very lightweight, but also still has all the power of a modern board.
Yeah.
Is your phone ringing?
It is. My wife is calling me. I don't think she knows I'm doing a podcast right now.
She should jump in the chat and ask what she's going to ask.
Oh boy. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to us talk about Onewheels. This is my soft promo for float wheels. I love them. I want to see them succeed. They're awesome. They're so powerful. Shout out to Future Motion for starting the sport
And continuing to make good boards.
continuing to make
They
good
do
boards.
make good boards.
Yes. And hey, there's something to be said for an American company making it happen.
Totally.
You know, in the world where it's easy to go overseas and get stuff cheap and made for cheap, glad to see people are doing it in the U.S. So yeah, if you're thinking about a one wheel, it's a fantastic vehicle. It is truly the best. It gets you around a city, gets you around a neighborhood.
Yeah.
If I was like a wildfire firefighter going on those trails, I would have a one wheel so I could ride wherever I have to go.
Yeah,
I take
100%.
it to set. It's fantastic.
Yeah, for all of the talk about the risk and danger of a one wheel, that's always just like asterisked by it's still the best thing in the world. I would give up everything else in my life before the one wheel. If I had kids, I would give them up before the one wheel.
I mean, one of the first things I taught my kids how to do is ride the one wheel with me. They always have to wear their helmet, of course, always. And they stand between my legs on the pads, and hold their hands, and we ride the one wheel. We have not practiced crashing, but we will. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not. Yeah, without having a one wheel in life, I don't think life would even be worth it.
Oh my gosh.
I'm only slightly exaggerating.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We're going to do our after party here on corridordigital.com, hanging out live with our subscribers. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah.
All right. On to the after party.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
All right.
1, 2, 3.